Before microwaves and takeout apps, folks whipped up full meals in just 5 minutes. No timers, no shortcuts, just grit, grease, and a hot pan. These were the dishes that got America through the Great Depression, blackouts, and back-breaking days. But most, completely erased from today's cookbooks. So we dug deep, back through the oldest recipe cards and grease-stained pages, to bring you 30 forgotten 5-minute meals that once kept families fed and alive. They're fast, they're frugal, and they just might save your grocery bill in 2025. 1. Skillet Tomato Crumble. This one came from a 1930s church basement cookbook in Indiana, a side dish so quick you'd think it was a snack. But for broke families back then, it was dinner. All it took was a hot cast-iron skillet, a can of stewed tomatoes, and a handful of crushed saltine crackers. Folks would toss the tomatoes into sizzling lard or bacon grease, stir until bubbling, then sprinkle the crackers right on top. No cheese, no herbs, no fancy nothing, just heat, salt, and crunch. By the time the kids were done washing their hands, supper was ready. Mothers swore by it, not because it was gourmet, but because it filled the belly fast and made use of whatever was left in the pantry. Sometimes they'd add onions or a pinch of sugar if they had it. Most didn't. But here's what's wild. This humble little crumble didn't just feed hungry mouths. It taught people how to stretch nothing into something, how to make 5 minutes feel like a miracle. And that's just the beginning. Most nights, it was served straight from the skillet, placed right in the middle of the table like a trophy. No plates, just spoons and hungry hands. For kids who'd spent the day hauling coal or picking beans, that salty tomato steam meant comfort. Some even remembered the sound of those crackers crackling as they soaked up the juice, like a promise that bedtime wouldn't come on an empty stomach. And while city folks might have turned up their noses at a meal this plain, out in the countryside, it was survival food, it was dignity, it was love in 5 minutes flat. Years later, grown men would tear up talking about it, how something so simple could mean so much. 2. Emergency Egg Hash. This one came from the back page of a 1942 wartime homemaker's guide, printed when meat was rationed, gas was tight, and nobody had time to peel potatoes for breakfast. Housewives called it emergency egg hash, and it was the kind of thing you could make in a panic when company showed up uninvited or the kids came home starving. You'd take stale bread, torn, not sliced, and toss it in a greased skillet with whatever scraps you had. Maybe a spoonful of onions, a bit of bacon fat, or a chopped pickle if you were lucky. Once it browned, you'd crack in a couple eggs and stir like mad for 90 seconds. No fluff, no flipping. It wasn't pretty, but it was fast, hot, and surprisingly good. The trick was in the scraps. Some folks swore by a splash of vinegar to cut the grease. Others tossed in sauerkraut juice for zing. It was different in every house, but the goal was always the same: make something out of nothing and do it before the kettle boiled. School kids used to call it pan scramble and race home hoping Ma hadn't run out of eggs that day. And here's the kicker. Years later, after the war ended and the rations lifted, some families kept making it, not because they had to, but because they missed it. That smell, that sound, that skillet slap. It was survival turned into tradition. For a lot of folks, that egg hash wasn't just food. It was a memory burned into the walls of tiny kitchens. The clang of the cast iron, the hiss of bread hitting hot grease, the soft thump of an egg cracked one-handed. It was rhythm. It reminded people that being broke didn't mean being broken, and that 5 minutes could still taste like home. But there's one 5-minute recipe even faster, and it came from inside a moving train car. 3. Railroad Bean Mash. This one wasn't written in a cookbook. It was passed around by word of mouth from train car to train car during the 1920s and 30s. Hobos, porters, and traveling workers all knew it by different names: bean mash, hobo spread, freight car lunch. But the recipe stayed the same. 1 can of beans, 1 heel of bread, and whatever seasoning you could pocket or trade. You'd heat the beans right in the can, over a lantern, a firebox, or sometimes just a scrap of burning newspaper. Once it was warm, you'd smash stale bread right into it with the back of a spoon, stir like crazy, and add salt, pepper, or even mustard packets if you were lucky. That was it. 3 minutes, tops. Hot, filling, and portable enough to eat on a moving train with one hand. To outsiders, it looked like slop, but for the men riding the rails, it was gold. They'd trade stories, pass cans down the line, and teach newcomers how to stretch one can into 2 meals. Some even carved recipes into boxcar walls so the next traveler wouldn't go hungry. It wasn't just food, it was community in a can. Quick, quiet, and shared without question. And here's what's strange. Many of those men later settled down, started families, built homes, and kept making the same mash. Not because they had to, but because it reminded them of when they had nothing, and still shared everything. Years later, grandkids would find those same cans stashed in sheds or basements, not for emergencies, but for memories. And if you ever asked an old-timer why they still ate it, they'd just smile and say, "Because it got me here." But there's one recipe that never left the house. In fact, it was so secret, only the women in the family knew it, and they could make it blindfolded. 4. Whispered milk gravy. You wouldn't find this one in magazines or even most cookbooks. It lived in memory, passed quietly between mothers and daughters, scribbled on the inside cover of Bible pages or on the back of flour sacks. Folks just called it milk gravy, but it was more than that. It started with a dab of saved fat in a hot skillet, bacon grease if you had it, lard if you didn't. Then a spoonful of flour, stirred fast until golden. Finally, in went the milk, a splash at a time until it thickened into something creamy and smooth. No measurements, no timers, just instinct. Some stirred in a pinch of pepper, others a splash of coffee or vinegar to cut the richness. It was poured over boiled potatoes, leftover biscuits, even canned vegetables when meat was scarce. It wasn't just a sauce. It was a way to turn not enough into plenty, the kind of food that fed big families with empty wallets. Every woman had her own rhythm with it. You could hear the scraping of the spoon, the quiet hum of concentration as she worked that pan like a dance. It wasn't flashy, but it was sacred. And when you tasted it, hot, thick, and just a little salty, you could feel the years of practice in every bite. Some nights the gravy was the whole meal, not a topping. A wide bowl, a ladle, a shake of pepper, and a spoon for every kid at the table. Folks said you could tell a home by its gravy. Thin when times were lean, richer when payday came, always hot either way. It tasted like care more than cream, like someone stayed standing so you could sit and eat. And just when supper seemed done, some mamas would reach for one last thing in the fruit bowl, an old apple, and toss it in the same skillet to stretch the comfort just a little further. 5. Brown sugar apple rings. When the gravy bowl scraped clean, some mothers went right back to that hot skillet and made dessert out of almost nothing. One apple, sliced into thin rings with the peel left on, slipped into a little butter or bacon grease. A quick dust of brown sugar, maybe a pinch of cinnamon, and a tiny splash of vinegar to wake it up. 2 minutes per side and the sugar turned shiny and glassy, the apple softened, and the kitchen smelled like fairground pie. Folks laid the rings over leftover rice, or spooned a ribbon of milk around the edges so the syrup could run and sweeten every bite. Most nights there was only one apple to go around, so the knife did careful work. Thin slices meant more smiles. Kids learned the sound of just right, the soft hiss when sugar met heat, the little lift of a fork when the center wobbled but didn't fall apart. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like a small party after a hard day. You didn't need plates either. A shared bowl and warm spoons were enough. On winter evenings, those rings could change the air in a house. The coal stove ticked, boots dried by the door, and tiny crystals of steam fogged the window where someone had traced a heart last week. A father might flip the slices with a pocket knife because the spatula went missing, and a grandmother would tap his wrist and say, Gentle now. The sugar clung to the apples like stained glass. A child would hold one up to the lamp and see gold shine through. And for 5 sweet minutes, the whole room got quiet. Not because there wasn't more to do, but because this was the part worth pausing for. And when apple season ended and the fruit bowl went bare, that same hot skillet met something tougher than fruit. A bitter backyard green folks fried when money got tight. 6 Dandelion Greens. Fry-up. When apples ran out and gardens slept, folks turned to what grew for free. Dandelion greens weren't for show, they were supper. You'd snip a bowlful from the yard before the flowers opened, rinse off the grit, and drop the leaves into a hot skillet with a spoon of bacon grease. They wilted fast. A pinch of salt, a crack of pepper, maybe a splash of vinegar to calm the bite. 2, 3 minutes, done. Bitter, bright, and strong enough to stand alone or sit on top of a potato to make a full plate. People joked it tasted like hard times, but they kept eating it even when paydays got better. Grandmothers said the greens wake the blood. Field hands said it kept a man on his feet. Kids learned to judge the heat by the shine on the leaves. Too dull and you'd overcooked it, too wet and you hadn't given it fire. The pan told the truth, and so did the first bite. Spring mornings had a rhythm to them. A coffee can for cut greens, a cold tap to rinse off the yard, a skillet already warm from frying breakfast scraps. The kitchen window cracked open, you could hear a train far off and smell damp soil coming in. Someone would tear a heel of yesterday's bread to swipe the skillet after the greens slipped out, catching the last of the salty fat. An uncle might brag he could spot the tender leaves from a porch away, and a neighbor would trade a jar of vinegar for a bowl of cooked greens on Sunday. No recipe cards, no timers, just eyes, hands, and a stove that remembered. It pops and sizzles like hail on a tin roof. Blink, and supper's done. And when the dandelions were gone and the yard went quiet, the skillet didn't rest. It turned to a pantry staple with a funny name and a quick temper, hominy that jumps when it hits hot fat. 7. Hominy quick fry. Hominy was the quiet hero of lean nights. You'd drain a can, blot it dry so it wouldn't sputter, and toss the kernels into a hot skillet with a spoon of bacon grease or butter. They'd blister and puff in minutes, crisp outside, tender inside. A hard shake of salt and black pepper, maybe a pinch of chili or paprika, and you had a bowl that ate like a meal. Some folks slid a fried egg on top. Others scraped the pan straight to the table and didn't bother with plates. The sound was half the joy. First a soft hiss, then sharp pops like gravel under a truck tire. Kids crowded the stove to watch kernels jump, and somebody always caught one on the wrist and laughed. The smell turned nutty and warm, with a little smoke if you'd scraped the bacon tin clean. Old hands swore you could tell doneness by the shine. Too dull, and you'd gone past perfect. Too wet, and you hadn't given it heat. A quick rain of chopped onion at the end made the whole kitchen smell like Sunday. The beauty of it was how fast it turned nothing into something. A tired mother could fry up a can while a baby cried on her hip, and the others banged forks on the table. It didn't need tending, just a watchful eye and a brave hand. You could bulk it with breadcrumbs, mellow it with cream, or spice it with hot pepper if someone had brought a bag home from the corner store. Even the old men liked it, soft enough to chew, strong enough to stick. You'd finish your bowl, wipe your lip, and still smell the butter on your shirt an hour later. Folks didn't write poems about hominy, but they sure remembered it when the shelves ran low. And when the skillet was still blazing, the quickest 2-can supper in America was next, corn and lima beans flashing together in one bright, hot minute. 8. Flash succotash skillet. This was the fastest hot plate a tired cook could make. 1 can of corn, 1 can of lima beans, both drained quick, straight into a smoking skillet with a spoon of bacon grease or butter. Stir hard for a minute, add a pinch of salt and black pepper, maybe a thumb of chopped onion if it's handy. The corn goes sweet and toasty, the limas turn soft and creamy. 2-3 minutes and the whole pan shines. Some folks hit it with a splash of vinegar or a dot of sugar to balance the bite. Others dusted paprika for color and called it done. It wasn't company food, but it was proud. Mill workers ate it before the night shift. Kids ate it after ball practice. You could scoop it beside eggs, over potatoes, or right onto a plate with a pat of butter that melted down the hill like summer. The sound was a soft scrape and hiss, the smell sweet and green. If the pan was hot enough, the corn popped like tiny fireworks. Saturday kitchens moved fast when this showed up. Someone would crack the window, let in street noise and a little cool air, and that skillet would talk, first a whisper, then a steady sizzle. A father might tip the pan and show his son how the limas should look, not broken, not pale, just glossy and full. A grandmother would reach past him, pinch a kernel, and nod without smiling. Approval given, lesson learned. You could stretch the plate with a crumble of yesterday's cornbread or make it richer with a spoon of milk at the end, swirling the pan until the sauce turned soft gold. And when money ran thin, this was the dish that kept tempers calm and bellies warm, the quick glue that held a house together for one more night. When the plates came back empty and the skillet was still humming, most cooks didn't slow down. They reached for the simplest trick of all, browning leftover potatoes until they sang. 9. Leftover potato skillet. Nothing went further than yesterday's potatoes. You'd slice the cold ones thin or cube them rough, drop them into a hot skillet with a spoon of bacon grease, and let them sit till one side browned hard. No stirring at first. That crust was the prize. A little onion if you had it, a shake of salt and pepper, maybe a pinch of paprika. 2, 3 minutes per side and the edges went crisp, centers stayed soft, and the kitchen smelled like morning, even if it was near dark. Every house had its own potato law. Some swore by smashing a few pieces flat with the spatula to make extra crispy bits. Others tossed in a spoon of pickle brine at the end to wake the whole pan up. The brave slid the skillet under the broiler for a minute when the stove ran hot. Kids would fight for the darkest corner piece. Old folks wanted the soft middle. You could hear supper in the sounds, the quiet hiss, the scrape of metal on iron, the little cheer when the cake flipped whole. A mother might hide a handful of chopped greens in there, a father might fold in a fried egg for himself, and a grandmother would just nod at the color and say, "That's right." It wasn't fancy food, it was steady food, the kind that made a table feel safe. Folks kept a tin by the stove for drippings and tapped in a spoon without looking. The heat stayed just under mean, so the onions didn't scorch, and the flip happened on account you learned as a kid. 3 slow breaths, then turn. You could stretch it with a splash of milk or a crumble of yesterday's crusts, but even plain, it tasted like the day was finally over. And when the pan was empty and the stove still warm, the next 5-minute comfort was waiting in a bowl. Day-old cornbread crumbled into hot milk till it ate like a hug. 10th cornbread-in-milk bowl. This was the hush of the evening. After the plates were cleared and the fire dimmed low, someone would reach for the leftover cornbread, the dry heel, the broken edge, maybe a piece saved on purpose, and crumble it into a warm bowl. Hot milk got poured slow over the top, just enough to soften but not drown it. Some added a pinch of salt, others a spoon of sugar or a drizzle of molasses. In 5 minutes, you had something that wasn't quite soup and wasn't quite cake, but filled the belly like both. It wasn't made for guests or special days. It was made for people who were tired, quiet, and done chasing. The kind of dish that didn't need talking. You'd eat it with a spoon, slowly, the steam curling up like a lullaby. Grandparents swore by it for aches and sleepless nights. Mothers gave it to children who missed supper. It wasn't just easy, it was kind. In some homes, this was the bedtime ritual. You'd see the flicker of a lamp, hear the low clink of a spoon in a ceramic bowl, and know someone was winding down. The cornbread held the heat like a blanket, and the milk carried every bit of the day with it, sweet, tired, forgiving. Some folks added cinnamon if they had it, a few stretched it with canned milk when fresh ran out. It wasn't about hunger by then. It was about closing the day with something warm and gentle. You could measure the closeness of a family by how they passed this bowl around. Sometimes it wasn't one for each. It was one shared, scooped from both ends by 2 spoons, and no words. The oldest child might get the crustier corners, while the baby got the soft center swimming in milk. In rough winters, folks rationed the milk and stretched the cornbread thinner, but they never skipped it. Even when meat was gone and sugar low, this bowl reminded everyone there was still warmth to give. But not all 5-minute meals were this quiet. Some hit the pan loud and greasy, like the old farm favorite with cracklins and eggs that woke the whole house in one sizzle. 11. Crackklin Egg Scramble. This wasn't a quiet dish. It snapped, popped, and hissed the moment it hit the pan. Crackklin Egg Scramble was born from scraps, from the crispy bits left behind after rendering pork fat or saving up bacon ends in a tin by the stove. You'd drop a handful of cracklins into a hot skillet until they sang, then crack in 2 or 3 eggs and stir like lightning. No cheese, no milk, no fuss. Just fat, salt, and fire. It only took a minute or 2 before the eggs set and the cracklins curled, giving the dish a chewy crunch that stuck in your teeth and your memory. Some folks added onion or hot pepper, but most just scraped it straight from skillet to plate, still sizzling. For farmhands and early risers, this was breakfast and lunch all in one. It filled you fast and stayed with you till supper. The kitchen lit up when this hit the fire. You could smell it from outside, the porky smoke drifting through screen doors and open windows. Kids came running barefoot, hoping for just one bite. Grandfathers taught boys how to render lard properly so you got good cracklins without burning the pan. And when times were lean, a single egg scrambled with a handful of cracklins could stretch across 3 small bowls, each one steaming, each one appreciated. Some said it was a poor man's feast. Others just said it was the best part of the pig. Either way, it never lasted long. And after the last fork scraped the plate, you'd still hear that skillet clicking and cooling like it was catching its breath. Sometimes the grease from the cracklins was saved for the next dish, poured off into an old coffee can near the stove. Nothing got wasted, not flavor, not fat, not time. And if the skillet stayed hot, there was one more trick folks loved to pull. Drop in a slice of Bologna and watch it puff like a little red hat. But not every 5-minute meal came from meat. Some came in a circle, fried fast and flat, from a slice of Bologna blistered hot in a dry pan. 12th. Fried Bologna rounds. This was the 5-minute king of lunch, and sometimes breakfast, dinner, or whatever you needed it to be. You'd take a thick slice of Bologna, score the edges so it wouldn't curl too wild, and slap it into a hot, dry skillet. No oil needed. The meat carried its own. It sizzled loud, puffed up like a little dome, and browned in patches that looked like burnt gold. Flip once, maybe twice, and it was done before the coffee finished brewing. Some folks laid it on a biscuit or cornbread, others just ate it with mustard on the side and called it good. It wasn't glamorous, but it hit the spot. You'd smell it from the porch and know somebody was fixing something that tasted better than it had any right to. It was smoky, salty, greasy in the right way, and for many kids, it was their first love affair with the frying pan. It showed up when the fridge looked empty, but your stomach didn't want to hear it. Parents sliced the Bologna thick if they liked you, thin if it had to stretch. A fork pressed into the center kept it from doming too high, and some folks dropped in an egg right beside it, letting the flavors dance in the fat. It was quick, hot, and smelled like Saturday mornings in a house full of noise. Sometimes a tomato slice or a leftover biscuit joined the plate, but even plain, it was a meal that made you feel full and seen. And if you were real lucky, the crusty ring left in the skillet got saved, for the next thing that needed just a bit of meat magic to come alive. It wasn't just fried meat, it was a sound, a smell, a memory that clung to your clothes and filled up the quiet, the kind of meal that made you feel like somebody still had your back, even when the cupboard said otherwise. And the next skillet trick didn't need meat at all, just a dusty can of salmon, a splash of milk, and 5 minutes on low heat. 13. Creamed salmon skillet. This one came straight from the pantry and hit the table fast. You'd pop open a can of salmon, bones, skin, and all, drain it quick, Then flake it into a hot skillet with a spoon of butter or saved bacon grease. Stir it just enough to warm through, then pour in a splash of milk or cream, a little salt, a dash of pepper, and maybe a whisper of onion powder if you had it. Simmer for a minute or two until it thickened slightly, then serve it over boiled potatoes, old toast, or whatever starch was hanging around. It wasn't fancy, and it sure wasn't pretty, but it filled the plate and quieted a house. The fish broke down silky, the milk picked up just enough brine, and the skillet took on a smell that said, "There's still something good left." In coastal towns, folks used fresh fish if they could, but inland, the can was king. It made one small tin feed 3 mouths, and nobody left the table hungry. Mothers taught daughters how to stretch it without shame, adding breadcrumbs, a pinch of flour, even a spoon of mashed potato to bulk it up. Some would stir in peas for color or cracked an egg in at the end to thicken it fast. It was the kind of meal you made without planning, without fuss, without a single complaint. The skillet gave back what you gave it: gentle heat, quiet hands, a little patience. Even the bones melted soft, full of strength. Grandparents called it war supper, the kind of meal that reminded folks they'd made it through worse. And after the last spoon scraped the plate, that pan still hummed with warmth, ready for whatever came next. It was one of those meals that didn't ask much but gave plenty back, the kind where every bite reminded you that even from a can, even in hard times, you could still make something warm, filling, and worth remembering. And next came something sharp and green, tomatoes sliced and dusted in cornmeal, then fried hot till their edges crackled like summer. 14. Fried green tomatoes. This one crackled like a summer porch screen door. You took firm green tomatoes, sliced thick, not too ripe, and dredged them quick in cornmeal, sometimes with a bit of flour or salt mixed in. The trick was not to soak 'em. No egg wash, no fuss. Just a slice, a dust, and into the hot skillet they went, sizzling loud the second they hit the fat. You'd fry them for about 2 minutes aside until the edges browned and the center softened but still held its shape. They came out golden, crunchy on the outside, tart and juicy inside. Some folks sprinkled a little salt or added hot sauce right after the flip. Others layered them into biscuits with bacon or just set them on the plate like the main attraction. Either way, they never lasted long. They were the kind of side dish that made people hover near the stove with a fork in hand, waiting to grab one straight from the pan. Fried green tomatoes weren't just food. They were tradition, passed down from barefoot summers in backyards and front porches where the tomato vines ran wild. A grandmother might fry them before church, or a father might make them after cutting grass in the sun all day. The skillet popped and hissed as the cornmeal crisped, each slice a little different but all tasting like home. You didn't need a recipe, you just needed a warm kitchen, a little oil, and a few quiet minutes to remember what it felt like when life was simple, sharp, and good. It was the kind of dish that made you forget you were broke, tired, or worn thin, because for 5 golden minutes all that mattered was the crunch, the heat, and the way it felt to taste something your grandmother once called supper. And when the tomato slices were gone and the oil still shimmered in the pan, the next recipe went sweet and savory at once. Apples and onions, fried fast like a sunset in a skillet. 15. Onion and apple skillet. This was a sweet and salty trick that old-timers swore by. 1 pan, 2 ingredients, and a whole lot of comfort in 5 minutes flat. You'd slice up a tart apple and a yellow onion, both thin, both fast, and drop them into a skillet already hot with butter or bacon grease. The onion hit first, letting it soften just a bit. Then in went the apple, soaking up all the sizzle. A pinch of salt, maybe a sprinkle of brown sugar or a splash of vinegar depending on the mood, and that was it. The apple softened, the onion browned, and the smell turned sharp and rich, like fall in a pan. It wasn't dessert, and it wasn't a side. It was somewhere in between. Folks poured it over pork chops, spooned it onto cornbread, or just ate it with a fork straight from the skillet. The flavor danced between bright and buttery, and if you hit it just right, both would melt into something that tasted better than either one alone. It was a favorite in kitchens that didn't waste anything, not fruit, not fire, not time. You'd see a mother flipping slices with a butter knife while holding a baby on her hip, or a grandfather humming while scraping the browning bits off the bottom of the pan with the back of a spoon. The apple rings caught the onion's edge just enough to go soft and savory, and every bite felt like an old story passed down without words. Some said it came from the Germans, others from the mountain folk, but no matter where it started, it stuck around because it worked. It was a skillet memory, fast and filling, with just enough sweetness to make you slow down and breathe. And once that pan cooled just enough, the next recipe came from the corn patch, a crispy golden spoonful they called corn oysters, fried fast and gone even faster. 16. Corn oysters. Don't let the name fool you. There wasn't a drop of seafood in sight. Corn oysters got their name because they looked like fried oysters, but they came straight from the cornfield and the back of an old Grange cookbook. You'd take fresh or canned corn, mix it quick with a beaten egg, a spoonful of flour, maybe a splash of milk, and season it with salt and pepper. Then you'd drop the batter into hot grease by the spoonful and let it fry until the edges curled and the middle puffed just right. They came out golden and crisp on the outside, soft and sweet inside, like little corn fritters that never made it to the dinner table because folks ate them straight from the pan. Some cooks added a pinch of baking powder for a lift, or a dusting of cayenne for heat, but most kept it simple. 4 ingredients, 5 minutes, and a whole lot of happy mouths. These little bites were the kind of food that disappeared as fast as they hit the plate. You'd see a kid snatch one with bare fingers and blow on it while chewing, eyes wide from the heat and the crunch. In church kitchens, women made them by the dozen and lined them up on paper towels, slick with oil. On farms, they were served with soup or as the meal itself when meat was short and the garden had given its last. The sound of batter hitting oil was soft, like a whisper, and the smell brought people in from the porch or the back 40. Some folks swore the trick was letting the corn rest in the batter for a minute before frying, gave it time to soak, to bind, to bloom. But however you made 'em, they always vanished before the second batch was done. And when the last fritter was gone and the grease still warm, some cooks reached for something even stranger, warming up cottage cheese, just barely, until it turned soft and savory in the pan. 17. Warm cottage cheese with cream and pepper. This was one of those old-timer dishes that made modern folks raise an eyebrow until they tasted it. It wasn't cooked hard or melted down, just gently warmed in a skillet or saucepan with a splash of cream or whole milk. The curds loosened, the cream thickened, and with just a pinch of salt and a heavy crack of black pepper, it turned into something smooth, rich, and quietly comforting. No flour, no butter, just warmth and fat doing their work. It took less than 5 minutes from cold to ready, and it was served just as simply, scooped into a shallow bowl, maybe with a biscuit or a few crackers on the side. Some folks crumbled cornbread into it, others poured it over boiled potatoes. It was soft food, yes, but it had strength to it. The kind of dish that showed up for the sick, the tired, or the worn out, and reminded them they were still worth feeding. In coal towns and country kitchens, this dish meant someone was looking out for you. A grandmother might make it when a child couldn't keep anything else down, or a wife might fix it after her husband came home from a double shift, too tired to chew. The smell wasn't bold, but it wrapped around you, warm dairy and pepper and something close to forgiveness. The curds swam gently in the pan, not breaking, just relaxing, and when spooned into a bowl, they gave off a quiet steam that seemed to hush the whole room. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't talked about, but it lived on through habit, through care, and through the kinds of hunger that had nothing to do with food. It was the kind of food you didn't brag about, but remembered years later when life got hard again, and all you wanted was something soft, warm, and made by someone who loved you. And the next dish? It didn't simmer. It froze. Sweet snow in a bowl, covered in maple syrup and cream, gone in seconds like childhood itself. 18. Maple snow. This one only showed up when the world turned white and quiet. Kids would run outside with metal bowls or tin pans, scooping the freshest snow they could find, clean, fluffy, and cold enough to bite. Back inside, a mother or grandmother would pour warm maple syrup over the top, slow and steady, watching it harden into golden ribbons. Sometimes they'd add a splash of cream, sometimes a pinch of salt, but most times they let the syrup speak for itself. The snow packed down soft under the heat, turning into a sticky, sweet slush that melted on your tongue like candy from the clouds. It wasn't a meal, but it was a memory in the making. You didn't need an oven or a skillet or even much planning, just a storm, a good coat, and someone waiting by the stove with the bottle ready. Maple snow was one of those quiet winter joys that made the cold worth it. Families huddled close, passing the bowl around with sticky fingers and red cheeks still raw from the wind. The house filled with steam from wet boots and hot breath, and the only sound was the soft scrape of spoons against metal. It didn't cost a dime, but it felt like a gift, the kind you didn't forget. Grandfathers might smile and say it tasted the same as it did in 1929, and mothers might sneak an extra bite after the kids left the table. It was more than just a treat. It was an event. Neighbors might come by with their own bowls, or cousins would crowd the kitchen barefoot in wool socks, shouting over who got the first pour. Long after the snow had turned to mud and the coats were put away, people still remembered that one afternoon when the kitchen steamed, the syrup smelled like trees and sugar, and winter didn't feel so cold anymore. And when the snow melted and the stove fired back up, the next 5-minute fix was hot, loud, and sticky in its own right. Popcorn tossed with warm molasses straight from the kettle. 19. Molasses kettle popcorn. This was the kind of snack that stuck to your fingers and your memory. You'd pop a batch of plain corn on the stove, not in a bag, then toss it into a big metal bowl. Meanwhile, on the back burner, you'd warm a spoonful of molasses with a dab of butter until it thinned out and started to bubble. Then came the pour. The hot molasses got drizzled over the popcorn and stirred fast, coating every puff with sticky sweetness and a deep, smoky flavor that no store-bought caramel corn could touch. It wasn't crisp like kettle corn or soft like candy. It was something in between, a little chewy, a little crunchy, and full of old-time flavor. You didn't eat it quiet either. Every bite snapped, popped, and pulled. Sometimes your teeth stuck together. Sometimes your fingers did too. But nobody cared. It was messy, fast, and so good it never lasted more than 5 minutes after it hit the table. Families made it in washtubs for barn dances, in Dutch ovens for church socials, or in big mixing bowls just because it was Tuesday and the weather was bad. The scent of warm molasses and toasted corn filled the whole house, drifting down hallways and curling into closets where kids hid handfuls in napkins to sneak back to bed. Grandmothers stirred with wooden spoons blackened from years of use, and grandfathers told stories about eating the same treat during the Dust Bowl when sugar was scarce, but molasses came cheap. Some added peanuts, others sprinkled in salt, but the heart of it was always the same, fast, hot, and made to bring people together. And when the bowl was empty and the room full of sticky fingers and laughter, someone always scraped the bottom with a spoon just to make sure none went to waste. And when the sweet was gone and the grease was still warm, some folks turned to the quickest meat in the house, liver, sliced paper thin and seared in seconds, with just enough onion to tame the edge. 20. Quick liver. Sear with onions. This was the kind of supper that didn't ask if you liked it. It asked if you were hungry. Paper-thin slices of calf or chicken liver, dredged in a little flour and salt, hit a screaming hot skillet and seared fast. 1 minute per side, maybe less. Then in went slivered onions, stirred into the pan just long enough to soften and soak up the drippings. The whole thing came together in under 5 minutes, fast, hot, and iron-rich enough to wake the body and hush the stomach. It was strong food, bold food, the kind you learned to appreciate by the second bite, not the first. Some folks served it over mashed potatoes, others piled it between biscuits with mustard or vinegar to cut the edge. And if the liver was fresh and the pan was honest, it came out tender, not rubbery, more like a steak's wild cousin than anything you'd find in a grocery freezer. In the South, it was known as working man's fuel. Factory wives fried it at dawn for husbands heading out before sunup. Grandmothers served it when they thought you looked pale or tired. The smell filled every room, punchy and rich, onions sweetening it just in time. It wasn't dainty, but it was dependable. Folks who grew up with it remembered the first time they saw it sizzle, the way it jumped in the pan like it was still alive, the steam rising like breath off a strong horse. And once you got used to it, really used to it, you started craving it on the hard days. It was 5 minutes of toughness on a plate, and it reminded you that strength didn't always come with a pretty face. And when the last piece was gone and the skillet cooled just enough, it was time to slice up something cheaper, saltier, and just as quick. Those thick-cut hot dogs and sweet onions that fried up louder than they had any right to. 21. Hot dogs and onions. Fry up. This was a 5-minute lifesaver when the fridge was near empty, but the mouths kept asking, "What's for dinner?" Thick-cut hot dogs, sometimes coins, sometimes halved lengthwise, hit the pan first, browning fast and curling at the edges. Then came the onions, tossed in with whatever fat the dogs gave off. The two cooked together in a loud, greasy dance until the onions went soft and sweet, and the hot dogs picked up a crisp that made them taste better than they had any business tasting. You didn't need buns, didn't even need sides. This was a plateful eaten with a fork or fingers, straight from the skillet. Some folks added mustard, others stirred in a spoonful of canned beans or a drizzle of barbecue sauce if they were feeling bold. But even plain, it filled you up and stuck with you. It showed up after little league games, graveyard shifts, and long-haul drives when nobody had the energy to talk, let alone cook. Mothers could make it one-handed, fathers called it pan sausage, just to make it sound fancier, and kids loved the way the onion bits caramelized and clung to the meat like candy. The smell hit hard, salty, savory, just shy of smoky, and filled the house in seconds. It didn't matter how cheap the hot dogs were. Once they browned in that pan, they tasted like $100. You'd hear the pop, the sizzle, the scrape of the spatula as someone gathered the crispy parts at the bottom. The best bites, always. Sometimes folks would crack an egg right into the middle of the pan and let it fry in the hot dog grease, turning scraps into a full meal without even thinking. It wasn't just fast, it was smart, and it tasted like someone still cared even when the paycheck hadn't shown up yet. And once that skillet cooled, the next move was to turn cornmeal into gold. Quick griddle cakes, known as Ho Cakes, cooked in the same pan, soaked in all that leftover flavor. 22. Buttermilk Ho Cakes. This was cornbread's quick-footed cousin, faster, flatter, and made right on the stovetop in 5 minutes or less. You'd stir together cornmeal, a splash of buttermilk, a pinch of salt, and maybe a dab of baking soda if it was handy. No eggs, no sugar, no fuss. The batter had to be thin but not runny, just thick enough to hold its shape when dropped into a hot, greased skillet. It hit the pan with a hiss, spread out in a circle, and crisped at the edges like a penny frying in oil. Flip once, maybe twice, and it was done. The inside stayed soft, the outside crackled, and the whole hoe cake carried the flavor of whatever fat you cooked it in, bacon grease, butter, even lard from a coffee can beside the stove. You'd eat it hot with a pat of butter, a drizzle of syrup, or just plain with whatever you were serving that night. It was a meal stretcher, a plate filler, and for some folks, the only bread they had all week. In one-room cabins and shotgun kitchens, hoe cakes were cooked on griddles, skillets, or even flat stones when metal wasn't around. A grandmother might make them before dawn while the fire was still catching, stacking them under a cloth towel to keep warm. They were passed down like heirlooms. Each family had its own mix, its own feel for the right batter. The smell of corn and fat woke up even the sleepiest child, and folks learned to flip by sound, the first sizzle, the second hush, Then the spatula slid under smooth. It was humble, quick, and always enough. It was the kind of snack that made you forget how simple it really was, because the moment that cider hit the hot pan and turned to steam, it felt like something worth celebrating. And when the last one came off the pan, the fire stayed hot for something even bolder, sausages glazed in cider that sizzled sweet and sharp in a single breath. 23 cider-sizzled sausage bites. This was the kind of recipe that smelled like Sunday even when it was Tuesday. You'd slice up smoked sausage, thick, not shy, and drop it into a hot skillet, no oil needed. Once the edges browned and curled, in went a splash of apple cider, maybe a spoonful of butter, and the whole pan came alive. The cider bubbled, hissed, and clung to the sausage like glaze, turning each piece shiny, sticky, and packed with smoky sweet flavor in under 5 minutes. It wasn't a full meal, but it sure felt like one. You could pile the bites into a biscuit, spear them with toothpicks, or eat them straight from the skillet while standing barefoot in the kitchen. Some folks added mustard, others dusted in red pepper flakes, but even plain, it hit all the right notes. Sweet, salty, and just tart enough to keep you reaching back for one more piece. This dish showed up when company came by unannounced, or when the rain ruined dinner plans and nobody wanted to fuss. The smell of apple and sausage curling through a warm house could change the mood in a minute. Kids stopped fighting, dogs stopped barking, and grown folks leaned against the counter with a fork and a grin. In some houses, it was the midnight snack after church socials. In others, it was the surprise dish that made leftovers feel like a celebration. You didn't need a recipe, just a hot pan, a steady hand, and enough cider to make the sausage sing. It was the kind of 5-minute magic that made a plain evening feel special, where the sweetness of the cider and the snap of the sausage turned a simple skillet into something that felt like it belonged to a holiday you hadn't planned, but were glad showed up anyway. And when it was gone, and the skillet still warm with sweet fat and sizzle, the simplest green in the pantry was next. Canned peas dressed up fast with butter and pepper, because even humble deserved to shine. 24 buttered peas from the can. This one was as simple as food gets, but when done right, it was pure comfort. You'd open a can of peas, drain off the liquid, and warm them in a skillet with a big spoonful of butter and a pinch of black pepper. No boiling, no seasoning packets, just heat, fat, and a little time. In just a few minutes, the peas would go glossy and soft, soaking up the butter until they tasted fresh again, even if they'd been sitting on the pantry shelf for half a year. Folks served them alongside everything: pot roast, mashed potatoes, fried chicken, or just a piece of bread. If you had a bit of leftover onion or bacon grease, it went in the pan too, but most folks didn't bother. The beauty was in the speed and simplicity. It fed tired kids, sick elders, or whole families trying to stretch one meal into 2. It was the kind of dish that stayed in the background but made the whole plate better. You'd see a grandmother stir them slow, not because she had to, but because that's how she was taught. A little extra butter never hurt. A sprinkle of salt made them sing. Some kids mashed them with potatoes, others scooped them up one by one with the back of a fork. The smell was quiet, just warm, green, and kind. And when the peas were gone, the last of the melted butter at the bottom of the bowl always got mopped up with a crust of bread or the corner of a biscuit. In homes where not much changed but the calendar, this dish held steady, proof that good didn't have to be loud. And when you needed something warm, fast, and filling to go with it, folks would turn to an old trick: simmering milk in a pot, dropping in a beaten egg, and stirring it into a soft, silky soup you could eat by the spoonful when money or energy ran low. 25 egg drop milk soup. This was poor folks' comfort food, plain, warm, and ready in less time than it took to set the table. You'd heat a pot of milk over low flame just until it started to steam, then slowly pour in a beaten egg while stirring with a spoon. The egg cooked in wisps, soft and silky, floating through the milk like ribbons. A pinch of salt, a shake of pepper, and that was it. No broth, no vegetables, no starch, just milk, egg, and 5 quiet minutes to make something that felt like kindness in a bowl. It wasn't much to look at, but it filled your belly and softened the edges of a hard day. Mothers made it for sick kids, tired husbands, and anyone who came in from the cold too quiet to ask for anything. It was light but rich, plain but perfect, and somehow always tasted better when eaten slowly, with both hands around the bowl. This dish didn't come from fancy cookbooks. It came from memory, passed down by word of mouth in cabins, coal camps, and farmhouses where nothing got wasted, and every ingredient had to matter. Some added a slice of bread at the bottom of the bowl to catch the heat. Others stirred in a splash of canned cream or a dash of nutmeg if they felt bold. But most kept it simple because simple was enough. It was the kind of food that didn't just feed you. It told you someone still cared, still paid attention, still remembered how to make something out of almost nothing. It was the kind of meal you didn't crave until life wore you thin. Then, suddenly, nothing else tasted as right, or sat in your stomach quite so gently. And when the last sip was gone and the spoon rested in the bowl, the house felt a little quieter and a little more full. And once that quiet settled, folks would turn to what was left on the stove, yesterday's rice, maybe a spoon of sugar, and 5 minutes later, a skillet pudding that brought the whole table back to life. 26. Skillet rice pudding. This was dessert made from leftovers, and nobody complained. You'd scoop a bit of cold, cooked rice into a skillet with a splash of milk, a spoonful of sugar, and maybe a dash of cinnamon or nutmeg if the spice jar still rattled. Stir it over low heat until it thickened into something soft and creamy, just shy of porridge, just sweet enough to call a treat. In 5 minutes, you had a warm pudding that tasted like it took all day. Some folks added raisins if they had 'em, or stirred in a knob of butter at the end to make it richer. Others kept it plain and simple, letting the rice and milk do the talking. It was the kind of dish that showed up after church, before payday, or when the weather had worn everyone down and a little comfort was called for. Skillet rice pudding was often made with one hand on the spoon and the other wiping down the table. It cooked while dishes were washed, while stories were told, while babies fell asleep in someone's lap. The smell, warm milk and cinnamon, floated through the house like a lullaby. Grandmothers stirred it slow, not because it needed time, but because they knew slow made everything taste better. Kids would crowd the stove, begging to taste it off the spoon, and old men would sit quietly at the table, waiting for the first bowl. It didn't take much, just what you had, a little heat, and the patience to stir until something better appeared. It was humble, yes, but full of memory, of times when sugar was rationed, when rice was stretched, and when something this sweet felt like a little bit of luck scraped from the bottom of the pot. And when the last of the pudding was gone and the skillet wiped clean, the next dish came hot and fast from the garden, shredded cabbage and apple tossed in a quick fry that crackled like autumn in a pan. 27. Quick apple cabbage fry. This was the taste of fall cooked in a hurry. You'd shred up a bit of green cabbage and slice a tart apple thin, skins on, no fuss, and toss them into a hot skillet with a spoonful of butter or bacon grease. The cabbage wilted fast, the apple softened just enough, and the whole thing turned sweet, tangy, and savory all at once. A pinch of salt, maybe a splash of vinegar or a dusting of caraway seed if you were feeling fancy, and it was done in under 5 minutes. It wasn't quite a side and not really a main, but it filled the plate and warmed the room. Folks served it next to sausage, over mashed potatoes, or spooned it into bowls with nothing else at all. It was sharp and tender, light but filling, something you didn't think you'd love until it touched your tongue. This dish came out when the garden gave its last, when the cellar held just apples and onions and hope. It was weekday food, fast food, food that smelled like harvest and home. Grandmothers would make it while wearing aprons soft from washing, humming low while the skillet sang. Kids might wrinkle their noses at the cabbage, then take one bite and ask for more. The apple gave it sweetness, the cabbage gave it bite, and together they made something humble taste like it belonged at a feast. You didn't need a recipe, just memory and a hot pan, and when it hit the table, even the tired looked up. It was the kind of dish that came together faster than a complaint and disappeared just as quick. Some folks added a slice of smoked meat if they had it, but most let the apples do the talking. It was frugal, yes, but full of flavor, and made in the kind of pan that never left the stove, just got wiped clean and put right back to work. And when that pan cooled down, the next no-cook fix took shape in rough hands. Peanut butter, cornmeal, and molasses mashed into balls that stuck to your ribs and kept hunger far behind. 28 peanut butter cornmeal balls. No stove, no oven, just a bowl, a spoon, and 2 rough hands. You'd mix a spoonful of peanut butter with dry cornmeal and a drizzle of molasses until the whole thing stuck together like gritty dough. Then you'd roll it into small balls, no bigger than a walnut, and press them firm. That was it. No cooking, no chilling, no fancy tools. Just 3 ingredients and 5 minutes to make a snack that kept you going from sunup to sundown. They were dense, chewy, and rich, meant to stick to your ribs and quiet your stomach for hours. Farmhands packed them in shirt pockets, kids ate them on the walk to school, and soldiers took them out on long patrols. Sweet, salty, and filling, they were the perfect fuel when food was low but work was high. This was the kind of food you made when the cupboards were nearly bare, but you still had to keep moving. Mothers stirred the mix with tired arms, guessing the ratio by feel, not measurement. The cornmeal gave it grit, the molasses gave it iron, and the peanut butter pulled it all together like glue. You'd see a dozen of them laid out on a floured plate, ready to grab between chores. Some folks added oats if they had them, or cinnamon for comfort, but most didn't bother. These weren't meant to impress. They were meant to survive. It was the kind of snack that didn't melt, didn't crumble, and didn't care if you were rich or poor. It simply showed up in your palm like a little ball of strength, holding together the kind of days when all you had was what you could stir in a bowl and shape with your hands. And in those 5 quiet minutes, with nothing but a spoon and a bowl, something strong was built, bite by bite, ball by ball. And when those balls were gone and the day still had hours left in it, one final fast fix came from 2 pantry staples, corn and tomato, simmered into a 5-minute skillet stew that filled the house with summer. 29 corn and tomato skillet. This was 5-minute stew at its finest, straight from the pantry and onto the plate. You'd open a can of sweet corn and a can of stewed tomatoes, drain them just enough, and pour both into a hot skillet with a dab of butter or bacon grease. Stir it over medium heat until it started to bubble, then hit it with a pinch of salt and a dash of black pepper. That was all it needed. The corn stayed firm and sweet. The tomatoes broke down into a rich, tangy sauce, and in just a few minutes you had a dish that tasted like summer, even when it was snowing outside. Folks ate it on its own, or spooned it over rice, cornbread, or leftover potatoes. It was one of those in-between meals, not quite soup, not quite a side, but always warm, filling, and honest. The colors looked cheerful on the plate, and the smell could pull people into the kitchen before you even called them. It was the kind of food that came out when the money ran short, but the heart stayed generous. A mother might serve it in mismatched bowls, wiping the rim with a dish towel like she was feeding kings. Some added onion, others a splash of vinegar or hot sauce, but most just let the corn and tomato do their dance. The butter gave it body, the skillet gave it depth, and the whole thing cooked before the kettle had finished boiling. It didn't brag, but it never disappointed. You could make it by memory, by instinct, by need. And when the last bite was scraped up with a crust of bread, you'd feel full, not just in the belly, but in the soul. And then came the final recipe, one last 5-minute miracle from the back of the pantry, pan-browned canned potatoes, crisped hard and seasoned simple, because when all else failed, you could always count on the potato. 30 pan-browned canned potatoes. This was the last can on the shelf kind of meal, the one you turned to when all the fresh food was gone and the pantry looked back at you with nothing but quiet. You'd crack open a can of whole white potatoes, drain off the brine, and pat them dry with whatever towel was clean. Then, into a hot skillet, they went with bacon grease or butter, sizzling loud as they kissed the pan. No stirring at first. You let them sit and brown hard on one side. That crust was everything. Once the edges crisped and the bottoms turned golden, you'd flip them gently and hit them with a pinch of salt, maybe a crack of black pepper or some paprika if you had it. That was it. 5 minutes, maybe less, and you had a side dish, or a main course if times were tough, that filled the plate and stuck to the ribs. In a lot of homes, this was the dish that showed up when money was gone, but pride stayed strong. Mothers could stretch one can to feed 3 people, slicing the potatoes thin to make them look like more. The smell, rich, starchy, buttery, made neighbors peek through the windows, and the hiss of the skillet was enough to call everyone to the table without a word. Some folks added chopped onion or garlic salt. Others just let the potatoes speak for themselves. You'd see them served next to scrambled eggs, beans, or even nothing at all. And when the pan was scraped clean and the plates wiped down, you'd remember that simple truth passed down through hard times. If you've got a potato, you've got a meal. It wasn't glamorous, but it never let you down. Those browned little coins of comfort reminded folks that even when life felt empty, a hot pan, a can of potatoes, and 5 minutes of care could still make something worth gathering around. So there you have it. 30 forgotten 5-minute recipes that once lived on grease-stained pages tucked inside the back covers of old cookbooks, and in the hands of people who knew how to feed a family when the money ran out and the day ran long. These meals didn't come from chef shows or modern blogs. They came from grandmothers with worn-out aprons, from wartime mothers counting every bean, from dads who threw dinner together in a skillet because there wasn't time or food to do anything else. They weren't meant to impress. They were meant to get you through. So if you've been wondering what people used to cook when they only had 5 minutes and an old cookbook for guidance, now you know. If this video brought back a memory or just made you hungry, don't stop here. Watch our next video to discover even more forgotten recipes and food stories that kept America going when times were hard and money was tight. And if you felt something while watching, whether it was a smile, a memory, or just a growling stomach, give it a like. Share it with someone who remembers subscribe so you don't miss the next bite of history. And tell us in the comments, what did your family cook in 5 minutes flat? We'd love to hear it, and maybe even feature it in a future video, because these weren't just recipes from old cookbooks. They were real-life lifesavers. And the next one might be the story your kitchen's been waiting for.